All right. Podcast number 9, I think.
That many already.
Yeah, that many with Robert Sothmann, everybody, right here. Thank you so much for coming out to be on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we were just having a pre-podcast chat about all kinds of stuff, politics.
Yeah, we pretty much launched right into it, eh?
And martial arts. And so something you were just saying was that you believe the people who need to do martial arts the most are those who aren't doing it. Could you bring us back there a little bit?
Well, I mean, why do people traditionally take martial arts? I remember when I was growing up, the guys that were taking martial arts were the ones that they were like, I'm going to take Taekwondo. I was like, why do you go to this thing? You know, like, these pajamas are weird and whatever. And I was like, you can get exercise. It's not like you're in better shape than me. I just ran 45 minutes on the soccer field or whatever. And but the kid, it was my friends, you know?
Yeah.
And they would say, yeah, but I need it, you know, it gives me confidence. And I realized, you know, and they were very cerebral kids. They needed that confidence. These were nerds.
Yeah.
They needed that confidence. I
can relate to that.
I was a nerd.
I was one of those guys.
But I was a jock nerd. So I was like the nerd that, you know, would go and like I'd play on the school team or whatever, and I didn't feel physically intimidated. So I felt societal pressures or whatever else, but I didn't feel physically intimidated. And I wasn't going to be picked on too much physically either. So the thing is that I needed it. I needed that just as much as they did, but it was for mental reasons. I didn't need Taekwondo maybe, but maybe I needed wrestling. I didn't have it. Maybe I needed boxing. You know, it's not. It teaches you a lot of things. There's so many things that an actual combat situation or a simulated combat situation will teach you.
Yeah. So Rob, when did you first start martial arts?
I mean, if you don't count the couple forays into, you know, a month here, a month there in my teens, then I didn't start until I was 32. Or 31. No, yeah, about 32.
Okay, and that was here in China, was that correct?
Yeah, in
okay.
Shanghai. I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There was a guy who was teaching like one class a week, and sometimes they had an open spar an open roll on Saturday, and Tuesday night you had one class. It was like, you know, 1.5 hours. And I was at a local gym trying to regain some semblance of fitness and had no enthusiasm. I was recovering from a motorcycle accident. Well, motorcycle versus car accident. So I was on the motorcycle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I had a lot of joint problems, you know. I still do a little bit, but I really had joint problems, and I had atrophied significantly, you know, in the stabilization of my knees and lower back, shoulders. I had broken my wrist. I'd separated ribs. I still, like, my ribs never went back into place properly, you know. A lot of different things were wrong. So I wasn't able to just go to the gym and start pumping iron and getting my physical shape back. And I couldn't run. You know, my knees were ruined. And I was just like, well, what's this, you know? And these guys over here, there was some Thai boxing, there was some Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, that looks more my speed at the moment. I don't think I'm going to kick anything, but I'll hang around on the ground and learn this. And I kind of remembered that it was Hoist Gracie, you know, had 1 through 3, or 1, 2, and a super match in 3, I think it was. And I remember watching that when I was in college, and I was like, I'd like to learn this. Yeah. And there was a guy here, one of the first coaches in the city. He was a blue belt. That's a blue belt was a big deal in those days. If you had a blue belt, man, you were a force. Yeah. And this guy was not an average blue belt. He was a good blue belt, and he was a blue belt that was, you know, would go and fight MMA and stuff and take punches to the face. He was a salty little bastard. So yeah, he taught me a lot. Setsuma Takeda, he taught me a lot of stuff right off the bat, and he's the guy that got me in contact with Art of War, and that's how it all started. Was, you know, being fed to the wolves, and then going, oh, I didn't like that feeling. And the thing is, like, I didn't like the feeling at all.
let's talk
I
about that
hated
first fight. You fought Bao Li Gao.
Yeah.
To non-Chinese viewers, let's just point out he's kind of a big deal in Chinese combat sports. He was a national Sanda champion,
World Sanda champion.
Okay,
in the
there
early
we go.
2000s. Yeah,
It's a big dude.
I'd say
Heavy hitter.
One of the 2 or 3 top Sanda products of China of the last 10, 15 years easily. Like if you were to name like a top 3 from the last 15 years, there's not one person that watches the sport that won't say his name.
Indeed. I remember I fought in this K1 show where he was the main event, and I remember just watching him fight close up like, holy crap, I would not want to get hit by one of those.
Nah, dude.
And I remember you fought him, your very first foray into professional mixed martial arts.
It's a joke.
Like they literally threw you to the wolves, man.
Yeah, 4 days notice.
4 days.
I was supposed to go up there and hold water for Setsuma, and that was literally my goal, was to do that. And they had an opening for another gentleman, a little bit older than me, but he had a combat sports background, and so I was like, yeah, of course, the heavier weight guy, heavier weight class. They wanted 96 kilos plus, and I was like, okay, I got a friend that's that big. I'm not that big, but I got a friend that's that big here, take that. And Mario Mazoka, he had fought a bunch in Europe, amateur kickboxing, and he had won titles and stuff. So it made more sense for him to take a fight. So he fought he fought a little bit earlier on the card. I was just supposed to go and be his corner, and then the night before we're supposed to leave to go to Beijing on the train. This is when the Shanghai to Beijing train took 12.5 hours.
Oh yeah, it got better. It got so much better.
Oh, isn't it brilliant now?
I know, man.
4.5 hours.
I'm going to Beijing on the train next week, and I'm not even worried about it.
To go to Beijing by plane is almost redundant because of where the airports are, and then the amount of security and annoyance you have to go through. You can just get on the train, sit down in a nice spacious thing, walk around whenever you want. Nobody coming to molest you about your phone. You got phone reception all the way. You play your phone games, chat with your friends, all the way to Beijing, 4.5 hours.
Yeah. Oh man, the high-speed train from Shanghai to Beijing is amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. If you come from a country that does not have high-speed trains, your country needs them.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. Canada, America, you listening? Seriously, the train has transformed this country. In the time that I've been here, it's gone from being painful to get across a couple of provinces to being just a thought, an afterthought. Here's 100 kwai. I'm going to Wuhan. See ya. It's so brilliant now.
Man, it just makes me think if they implemented high-speed trains like this in the U.S., I mean, you could conceptually go from Los Angeles to New York in record time. And I know there are flights that do that all the time, but
sure,
man, it would be game-changing.
No, but it's totally game-changing. It's absolutely pollution, because a lot of people in North America are going to be driving cars. They go, well, I'm not going to fly. I'm going to drive for 6 hours. You don't need to drive for 6 hours. You just get on the train. And I mean, you could say you can get on the train in Canada, but please, man, I've been on the Canadian trains. It's nothing compared to the speed of this. This is 300 kilometers an hour and just absolutely smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's like living in the future, man.
Yeah, the first couple of rides, I mean, they had a couple of teething problems. And the first couple of rides that I took, I was like, well, if it goes off, at least it'll be quick. You know what I mean? I'll die quickly. It'll be a blaze of glory. 300 kilometers an hour, a train becomes like a satellite hitting the earth.
Yeah.
You go through the mountain, not over it. So
train-related deaths, though, they're pretty low on the scale of
real low.
Possible ways that you can die. I mean, car-related deaths, though, man, that's up there. That's big.
Dude, I'm on some chats and people are just sending videos of automotive catastrophes.
Oh man.
Usually to do, honestly, with trucks.
Yeah.
Taxis, intersections, and these miscellaneous non-linear kinds of transport. These little three-wheelers, these little when I mean non-linear, I mean when I say linear, I mean the people that have to stop because they have a license plate. So you have to stop for the light because there's a consequence. So there's no consequences to the people on the electric cycles, bicycles, walking, people with their goat pulling their cart, whatever. So you get these videos from countryside four-way stops, and it's just heartbreaking. You're like, wow, that I don't think anybody survived that. Goats run across the road. The people get flustered, spooked. They don't know what, so they stop their car. The guy comes around. He's lighting his cigarette instead of keeping his hands on the wheel or his eyes on the road or whatever. And his 10-ton truck just runs over like 3 cars. You see all kinds of stuff.
Man.
Like, yeah.
I see a lot of this stuff on my commute to and from the gym. I ride a scooter here and there, and man, it's shocking how many people ride scooters and motorcycles hands-free. But what I mean by that, they've got one hand on their phone, one hand somewhere else that isn't the steering, what do we call that, the handles?
They're checking with the phone, and they're manipulating usually the left side, of course, because the right side's a throttle. But they're manipulating it with like their wrist as they're checking their phone.
I don't know how every one of those people is not dead right now.
Well, I mean, technically I do know, but there's no real incentive for them to they can always blame somebody else. So you're the smaller vehicle, you blame somebody else. I saw somebody once fall down on the sidewalk and just blame. They were looking for something to blame. There was nobody around them. They fell, and they were looking and looking and looking, and everybody's like, yo, I'm not going anywhere near that guy. And they're like, and you can see the guy's blame wheels turning, and I was like, man, that's on you. You fell down.
This is an interesting part of Chinese culture, the idea of blaming or passing the buck along to, how we determine it? It's like whoever's driving the bigger vehicle is more responsible, something like that?
You'd think so, until it's a city bus, and in which case it's your fault, because he's a professional driver, and you're just a guy in a car.
Yeah.
Right, so he's not going to get in trouble. So they don't have any respect for you either. So literally, the private citizen driving a car is the one that, and I drive a car here, and I'm like, people say, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, I always assume the worst. If the guy's signaling left, I assume that he's turning right. If I don't take anything at face value.
Yeah.
Did that guy see me? Did he not see me? I don't know. And it doesn't mean I go slow. It's on the contrary, actually. I'm getting out of the radius of his stupidity as quickly as possible. So any erratic behavior, I go, okay, this guy's doing some silly things, and I'm going to move. The second thing is that almost all the new cars have nanny systems. They don't only have beepers for when you're backing up. They got beepers for when somebody's on your bumper in traffic. You're too close to somebody in the front, somebody's too close to the side. Warning signals, bells, whistles, lights, beep, 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 beep. So if you're driving like a new Audi in China, and they're features that aren't necessarily available in other countries.
Yeah.
Like on a lot of the cars, I'm like, I've
never heard of this stuff, actually, so wow.
Right. Like we didn't even have any reverse kind of bumpers or whatever. I mean, beepers or whatever. We got sonar on all our bumpers. Even the cheapest car in China's got you see those little round things on the rear bumper? Yeah. Those are sensors.
Really?
Yeah. So they're proximity sensors.
It's starting to make a lot of sense, because I see these people driving in such close proximity in these clusters.
When was the last time you saw somebody look over their shoulder to reverse?
Oh, wow.
Or to change lanes? They don't. They look at their mirror, because this is the driving test.
Yeah.
So now they have a computer that watches your eyes when you take the test, and if you take the test and you didn't check every so many seconds, you didn't check left, right, up, if you're not always, your eyes aren't always roving around, you fail.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they watch your eyes.
Right. So they want you to be looking at
Man.
right wing mirror, left wing mirror. You know what I mean? So you're always testing. You're always testing and checking. But they never do this. They don't check blind spots. There's no craning of the neck at all. Because I think that this is not part of the driving culture, craning the neck. So same thing with reversing. That's why cars here, even cars that are comparatively cheap, we'd be like, wow, it's a high-end thing. But it's not. Everybody, and the ones that don't come equipped with it, have installed cameras. A lot of people install cameras that are linked to the stereo system. So they got like a LCD dash, like a flat screen. Well, I mean, almost everybody has a flat screen in the
This
car
this
now.
is explaining a lot about why there are so many videos coming from
Oh yeah,
cars
everything
on
Well,
Chinese media and internet and so on.
well, that's a dash cam. That's a different.
Yeah.
That's aftermarket on most cars.
Right.
It's starting to be standard on some cars, but they put like they call it black boxing the car. So now
Okay.
you can get like a system. It's got a card in it, and sometimes it's just one camera. Other ones are one camera face forward, one faces into the car. Others are one camera in the front, one camera in the back, wired into a central unit. There's some of them are connected to the head unit, like to the amp and the stereo. This is all one unit. It's the electronics for your car in one package.
Man, I had no idea Chinese cars were this complicated, but it makes a lot of sense why I don't see as many collisions as I would
Yeah.
think that I would out on the streets. I mean, they are packed. If you've never been to Shanghai, it's one of the
It used to be worse.
yeah.
It used to be worse. Like the technology has increased worldwide due to the need to compensate for the lack of attentiveness in this country. And I don't say that with any malice. I'm just making an observation. So like when you have this many people in a small area, you tend to become a little bit introverted. And like, I just don't want to talk to anybody right now. If somebody's, oh, hello, how, I'm like, oh, crap. I just want to look at my phone, or I pretend I can't hear them. I got my headphones on. So you get on the subway, everybody shoves headphones in their ear. Everybody looks at the screen on their phone. Well, same thing in the car.
Yeah.
If you're trying to merge with somebody, they're not going to let you merge. If you make eye contact with them, they're very cordial. And all of a sudden, the guy that you were ready to pound, he's like, oh, no, after you, of course, man. We're all civilized here, And you realize that you need to make that personal contact. So I wind my window down.
Interesting.
And I gesture out the window. I'm like, I need to go here. And I make him look at me. I make him pay attention to me as a person, not me as a car to beat. Because it's just like, small things, incrementally. Sorry, I just hit the mic. Small things, incrementally creating value.
Yeah.
So like, it's the value of little paper cuts. You know what I mean? You're hacking away at the tree, a nibble here, a nibble there. So like, if he's trying to get home, he's beat you, he's ahead of you, then next time he's up there, he doesn't let that guy in. Beat that guy, he got 3 cars ahead of where he was yesterday at the same time. This is and it's small and it's petty, but it's our nature as people, is once we don't look at each other as equals, as also in need of the same things, like I look, okay, that guy's also trying to get home, so why don't I get out of his way? So I may or may not let him go first, but I will not impede your progress. If I go in front of you, I'm gone. I'm getting out of your way.
Yeah.
I'm not pulling in front of you.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
I'm just not going to insist to be in front of you and then drive slower than the speed limit.
That happens to me all the time when I drive on a scooter,
Ooh,
man.
Left
All
lane
the time.
bandits. Wait till you're on the highway. And there's 4-lane highways out here. Like on my way home, that's 4 lanes each way. So it's an 8-lane highway, really. And sometimes the outside lane, the limit is 120, which is like 75 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And in the left lane, there'll be some dude doing like 85 kilometers per hour. So he's doing like 50 miles an hour, and he's causing a traffic jam at high speed. He's causing, because everybody wants to do like 80. Everybody's trying to get home. They're doing 130 kilometers an hour, 140 kilometers an hour. And this dude's like, yep. The minimum is 80. It says 80 to 120 here, and I'm doing 80.
Man, traffic it's a fascinating thing. I think in some ways it's a microcosm for life and human behavior in general, but at the same time, something about being inside of a car instead of a vehicle, physically separated from other people, makes us act differently. I think in one way it brings out our animal nature, hence road rage and whatnot, but yeah. But it's interesting you brought up the idea of making eye contact with people, and suddenly that humanizes us again.
Yeah.
Because I'd never really thought about that in terms of, doing that on the road.
I went through road rage episodes. I wouldn't say it was rage on my part so much as indignation. Like I just demanded to be thought of as a human being. And, you know, when I used to ride around on 2 wheels, and I felt that people were taking my life for granted. And, you know, a cynic would say, well, you were taking your life for granted if you were driving 2 wheels in China. But I was like, no, I've got perfect control of the motorcycle. I just don't like that other people don't appreciate that I'm there. They obviously don't care enough to check or care enough to give me a berth of at least a couple of meters. There's people that are trying to trim off your handle grips, you know. And I thought that this was a little much. So, like, I've been in some incidents, you know, this probably 12, 13 years ago, I got in some large incidents. But then I got in an accident. And I didn't take a break from motorcycles. On the contrary, I got wilder. Because I was basically like, okay, so the Nissan didn't kill me, and now my body's ruined. At least that's how I felt at the time. I was like, I don't have my full sporting capability, and that's it. And so now I might as well just be a complete nutter on a motorcycle. So I had to reel myself in and find something to live for again after that, which was actually martial arts. It kind of brought me back from a destructive path, which was, I don't want to say motorcycles destructive, but I was also smoking and drinking a lot, and just, I didn't really have a goal. You know, I got up to like a half a pack a day or something, which is, you know, for people that think that's nothing, you know. My uncle smoked 2 packs a day. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but I wasn't really a big smoker. And so to work yourself up to half of a large pack a day, that's a fair amount of cigarettes, you know. Your fingertips start to smell funny, you know.
Yeah.
And you start to taste it in the morning. And I always swore that if I woke up and lit a cigarette before I had breakfast or had water or anything, that was a wake-up call, because I always looked at people that did that as like, what's the matter with you, junkie? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I woke up one morning and I stumbled out of bed and I flipped the lighter and lit a cigarette. And then I went, yo, this is okay. Well, this is the last cigarette. You better enjoy this one. Then I put it down. And, you know, that was basically the end of cigarettes, or end of the habit. Let's put it that way.
That is fascinating. I've known so many people who have struggled so much with you know, quitting cigarettes, and man, just to hear that story from you, that's fascinating, because as long as I've known you, you've been like this super athlete, basically, this strong guy, this martial artist. You're giving me some funny looks, like I'm not a super athlete or whatever. Let me just put it this way: Rob's a pretty strong guy. He's a good fighter. I'm going to say that. I've seen him fight a number of times.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
This is a good compliment.
He knows what he's doing in the cage. He's one
I
of these people.
I don't always reflect it, but it's...
So to hear this story about basically you not being that's interesting.
I went from being that to being vulnerable. So I was not being a fighter. I didn't feel the need to fight. I was like, I'm beyond the average person. Like there's you know, professional athletes, and then there's Rob somewhere floating on the tail end of that because he chose the wrong sport, and then there's the rest of the world. And that's how I felt. I didn't feel like there was any problem. I was like, whatever, if there's a problem, I'll solve it, you know, as long as it doesn't involve a gun, I'm good. Problem is that, one, you overestimate yourself, and most men do this. They overestimate their ability to handle physical confrontations,
especially in fighting, man.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they overestimate their ability to
Every
handle
guy
themselves
thinks he knows
physically.
how to box until he actually puts on the gloves and tries it.
You know what? Because in college I went to try that one time. Like boxing. I went to a kickboxing club with like a high end like kickbox. It was like a little industrial unit, probably a third the size of this. Yeah. And man, like I did a little sparring with my friend that had taken me there, and I tooled him. Bap, 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 hit him whenever I wanted. I had longer arms. I was faster. I was a better athlete.
Yeah.
2.5 months later, we went back, and I sparred around with him, and it was even. And he hit me a couple of times where I was like, yo, dude developed a jab in 2.5 months.
Yeah.
I was like,
so he was training consistently the whole time?
He was there 4 times a week, right? And I was just doing whatever, partying and playing ball in my spare time and whatever. And then I sparred his friend who had been there for 2.5 years. And we're talking a shorter Italian guy, Italian Canadian. And he's shorter than me and stubby, but very muscular. It's a guy that did like 1,000 sit-ups a practice kind of guy. And he absolutely tooled me. We weren't kicking, by the way. If we were kicking, that would have been way faster. I would have been done. But we're just boxing. And he tooled me. He rung my bell. And I was like, okay, I think I've had enough. And I didn't go back to it. I just realized that there's levels to it. And so it caused me to pull myself back in terms of thinking that I can run around just poking people because I got a heavy hand,
Yeah.
And then when you start to do actual training with people that have fought like in hard competition, then you see some different shit.
Man, you see there's levels to the levels. Something I was thinking about yesterday.
There's levels to strength. There's levels to technique. There's levels to understanding. Like I sparred with Mario, and he was consistently hitting. Mind you, this is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so easily 10 years ago, more than that, probably 11, 12 years ago. But it was the first time that I heard somebody say something like that, because I had already been training for 1.5 years. I was starting to think, yeah, I'm pretty good, And Shanghai's not a fight city. So you train for 1 year or 2. At that time, you were already you start to be the toughest guy that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I wasn't, because I always had a couple of big brothers, these guys, man, the guy would hit everybody in the belly, either solar plexus or the liver, whether it was the hand or the foot. He found a way. He had weird things. He would dig his toes into your liver, bam, like he'd curl his toes back and hit you with the ball of his foot like a spike, like somebody with a hammer.
Ball of the foot roundhouse kicks.
Yeah, it's boop, 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 just a snap. So the knee come up, and then the foot would come out and slap you in the liver, right up under the rib. You take a big breath and okay, time out, Or he'd wait till you had, you'd flurry to the head, and there's a slight pause, and as you peek out and think you're going to slap him, he'd punch you in the solar plexus, So I asked him, how is he timing it? And he was saying that he was listening to my breathing.
Interesting. So
in the middle of us sparring, and we would spar heated.
Yeah.
And I would be coming forward, and I was doing all this, letting out as each strike is being punctuated by sharp exhaling,
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, so he's exhaled like 4 times. He's due for a nice inhale now. And boop, he'd hit me right as I was right.
Oh, that is
when your diaphragm shifting from exhale to inhale, it puff, and then your whole body, freezes up. So that's a solar plexus shot. Or he'd hit you in the liver, and all the booze that you drank is, basically every bad trip you had for the last month is just released. And all the pain and it's paralyzing.
Yeah.
It's paralyzing. If anybody's never been hit in the liver properly, they don't understand what paralysis really is. They see guys. Remember Nate Diaz dropped Robbie Lawler, and everybody was like, What is that?
My very first pro kickboxing match, I took a heavy liver shot, and the only reason I did not fall down is because my opponent was pinning me up against the turnbuckle, teeing off. And that is the only reason I didn't collapse, because of his weight. Yeah. And man, I got saved by the bell that round, because he had me up there for like half a minute or so. The bell rung, slinked back to the corner feeling like death, and somehow by force of will made it back for the next round and got beat up for another round. Man, it sucked.
I can totally concur with liver shots sucking, and I took the tidbit that he gave me, and I started working on it. And I'm not going to say I'm a liver shot master, but I find liver now. I go looking for livers. I go looking for shots on the body, liver this side, spleen that side, solar plexus. There's a lot of things. Everybody only sees. I was saying this to somebody else the other day, and we agreed on it, and then we expanded on it. But, when people watch basketball, most fans only see the shot or the dunk or the alley-oop at the end. They don't see what created the opportunity for that alley-oop. for that dunk, for that sick 3-point play. They didn't see I'm not talking about the discipline and the hours in the gym and the wind sprints and the shuttle runs and
just the transition getting to the score, right?
Right there, the thing that happened 5 seconds before, 20 seconds before, they didn't.
Yeah.
It's lost on us because we're not professional basketball players, or we're not even high-level players. We're not even that attentive. We watch highlights. We watch highlight reels. Everything's like a 30-second serving. Oh, look at this, Sports Center.
Yeah.
Oh, boom, boom, boom. Isn't he great? And then you're like, yeah, but the dude that set it up was this guy. If you really know what the sport. So, like, I grew up as a volleyball player. And you watch it, boom, all this, big bounce, big kill, big smash. And I'm like, yeah, but the block got frozen. It's not just that he's an amazing player, but it's not just that. The block got frozen by the other guys. The block got frozen because of the setter's head movement, or the middle player's body language, or something he said verbally as he was making a feint.
Yeah.
So that when the setter dished it back, like, behind his head, that guy only had one guy to beat, not three, Like, there's... So with fighting, it's the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Footwork.
Absolutely. I mean, we're such visually interested people, or creatures as humans. We want to see the big takedown, the big kinetic motion, the big punches and kicks and
knockouts,
whatever.
man. It's all about knockouts. Oh, my God, he just put him to sleep.
I'll tell you what, though, as a
it's
coach,
not
I am
that.
so interested in the transitions.
Minutia.
The glue in between the movement.
Minutia.
Puts it all together. Yes.
Minutia. The things that allow the kill shot. The previous round and a half of programming.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can watch somebody program somebody else, and you don't appreciate it until you start to do it yourself. And nobody taught me this because I didn't have consistent coaching, and this is something I really regret. I think it's hampered me in a lot of ways, but it's also expanded my vista. Even though I didn't go as deep as I could have, I see it wider, maybe because I had to go and seek a lot of answers myself.
Yeah.
And absorb it anywhere I could. So you learn some things when you go to Thailand. You learn something when you go to the Philippines. You learn something from a boxing coach from Europe versus a boxing coach from China versus, and anybody that I've spent more than one lesson with, or even sometimes just one lesson with. I'll go to seminars that are given by people that I could probably beat up. I'll still go to the seminar.
Oh, yeah.
And I learn shit. I learn. I'm like, well,
Everybody
how
has
is he
something to teach you.
controlling something? Absolutely. Like, how do you do that? Like, why is he thinking that this is a good technique? I'm like, okay, so would that work on me? Possibly, maybe not. But would it work for me? Well, like, is it that I'm seeing it, or is it that other people aren't seeing it, or is it something that I don't see? And because there's lots of stuff I don't recognize when it's happening, especially after you don't do something for a while. Like, you don't do gi jujitsu for a couple months, you get caught in all kinds of crap. I haven't done gi jujitsu for 2 years. I haven't worn a gi for 2 years. I shudder thinking about like, I'm putting it off, putting a gi back on, because I'll get collar choked. I'm going to get clock choked repeatedly. I can feel it.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I put the gi on twice a week for this specific two reasons. One, I appreciate the contrast. Even though I don't care about competing in the gi at all, I don't. I don't think the gi applies to mixed martial arts at all, but the reason I put it on twice a week, I don't want to be left behind, because so many people put so much value on the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as it relates to mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And if you're no good at the gi, people start scratching their heads thinking, he must not be good at MMA either. And I hate that that's the case, but it culturally is. And so
I watched something about that today.
Yeah.
Today. This is funny that you said that, because a lot of our jiu-jitsu our application of Brazilian jiu-jitsu to MMA is still through the lens of sport jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So through this application, we have a distinct sequence of events that we think has to occur. We think we should go to knee on belly. We think that mount is preferable to side control. We think that, because it's all points related.
Yeah.
We think that a back take is better than a ride.
Oh yeah, we've been trained in this narrative.
So like a back take is somehow better than a ride. But I'm like, with a strong opponent, you can lose control of these situations and you end up in a worse position than you would. There's literally no downside to a far side wrist ride. There's no downside. Like what I'm curious, what somebody can do if I got a wrist ride and they're escaping. If they escape, okay, then we're back to a neutral position. Yeah. If they try to escape and they fail, I win. I advance position. Oh, yeah. But it's not. I don't even want to say position because I'm still thinking about it in jiu-jitsu terms. Like it's MMA, so basically I'm in a position, and I've always rolled in jiu-jitsu like I was in an MMA fight. And I used to make a habit of it because there was nobody to train with in the earlier days of MMA in Shanghai, before everybody had cage walls and cages and there was gyms that had multiple brown and black belts in them and stuff. When there was nobody there, I was still rolling like it was an MMA match. Yeah. So I wasn't hitting people, but I was always trying to make 3 of my limbs control 4 of yours. So in my mind, I was always kneeing you in the ribs. You know, if you weren't watching where my leg was, I wasn't thinking about passing. I was thinking about kneeing. I was thinking about elbowing. I'm always thinking about that stuff. And so people are like, well, you had the sub right there. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not a sub guy. I just need to be in control of you long enough to punch you.
In mixed martial arts, submissions are relatively rare. I mean, like 49%, if I get that number correctly, 49% of matches end by TKO. That's basically somebody punching you to death.
And almost all, ground and pound.
And then after that, I think the next
ground
one
and pound's its own discipline. And this is something I've been saying for probably 3-4 years now, is that ground and pound's its own discipline. It deserves its own class. You have a boxing class at a mixed martial arts club. Or maybe boxing for MMA.
Or kickboxing for MMA. Some striking for MMA.
The stance is all changed, whatever. Blah. You've got like a Muay Thai for MMA. You've got, or we just call it all together striking, right?
Yeah.
So you got...
And nobody's teaching ground and pound.
You've got jujitsu, nogi. Okay, all these leg locks, all this stuff. But you want to know the 2 places where the fights usually determined, like finalized. It's not necessarily determined, but finalized.
Yeah,
is against the cage and on the ground.
Oh, absolutely.
Like wedged up on the cage, not in a standard jiu-jitsu position like A, B, or C, but I mean like some kind of wild ground scramble that involves getting hit with elbows, knees, and fists. And same thing against the cage. It's not a clean Muay Thai plum. There's no ropes. There's no play. It's the cage, and it's somebody's forearm and your throat grinding your ear through the mesh.
Indeed, it's a stuff we don't train for in cross training.
And the other things that we don't train for is when we go to competition, but we're not mentally prepared. You're not mentally prepared for the difference in being the bad guy always. You're always the villain. I never competed in North America. I've never competed in front of a friendly crowd.
Yeah.
There's yet to be a crowd that was actually pro-Rob, except for last year I fought here in Shanghai in a very small show, and that was pro-Rob. But the other, and I got mixed feelings about that as well. I felt like I was the bully, and I didn't like that feeling.
Yeah, I got to say, I was not prepared for that at all when I first got here. My first fight in China was up in Xi'an, and they were interviewing me saying, look angry, look mad. I was like, I'm not angry. What are you talking about?
Oh, you did it too, yes.
Yeah. And I realized they're trying to portray me as the heel, basically.
Yeah, man.
This heel-face dichotomy that... was so big in pro wrestling back in the day, still is, but they were trying to bring that to the, introduce this narrative. Here is our national hero fighting this evil bad.
Defending our martial honor against this foreign invader who thinks his kung fu is superior.
Exactly.
And I didn't think I was superior to anybody. My first fight was just like that. And everybody thought I was a complete asshole because I'm kind of an animated guy if I feel like it, and I didn't have to cut weight or anything. I was basically a walking weight, and they were like, you're 2 kilos heavier than he is. It's cool, all good. Just ham it up a bit, and you're gonna have an interview. And I was like, but I don't have anything to say. I don't know. And there's say something about your opponent, But I'm like, I don't know him. I heard what's his name again? I don't even know him. I know nothing about this scene. I'm a guy who has you know,
Yeah.
I've been taking this for a little while, and I want to try it out, you know, in a real. I'm itching for somebody to punch me in the mouth. Literally, that's what it was. I didn't think about the pressure. I didn't think about anything. So I'm having this interview, and I'm like, I was wearing, coincidentally, it was pure coincidence, I had a shirt on that was actually the map of China. It was like my only pro-China shirt, you know.
Yeah.
It's like a map of China. It's in gold and red, and I'm like, oh, so I said, where's he from again? Oh, Inner Mongolia. Okay, so I was like, yeah, you're from up here, right? And we're here in Beijing with this little star, but you know, I'm going to fling little pieces of you all over the map. I'm going to send every province a piece of you know. Yeah, it's like, yeah. I hope you're paid up on your health insurance, because you know they might outlaw this sport after our match. You know, and I said this kind of stuff, right? I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, wow, you know, like Randy Macho Man Savage style shit. But I was trying to, but I couldn't keep a straight face, so I was like lying, right? I was like, I'm gonna wring your neck, and it was all. It's just, I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And it's literally, it's not me. Like the over the top shit. And they're like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's great. And I was like, my attitude was, I don't know what I just said, and I guess
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
It's weird, man. It's super
But
weird.
You look like a knob when you do that stuff here. The appreciation, due to the pro wrestling becoming more popular, the appreciation for trash talk has just started here.
Yeah.
So like a guy like Chael Sonnen would be a world-class heel here. They would not appreciate it as trash talk,
yeah.
or Conor's gamesmanship or whatever. That doesn't fly in Asia, not just here, Asia in general.
Yeah.
Like you can't see anybody in ONE FC talking this way. The only place that does that is Japan, because they have, again, pro wrestling.
Yeah, they've been trained in that narrative. Did
Yeah.
you see the Ultimate Fighter China they did a couple years back with...
Most boring show of all time.
Yeah. You remember how polite those guys were?
They got great fighters, but what they didn't understand is that all these, it's such a small, it's not a small pool, it's a narrow pool.
Yeah.
Like it's a deep pool, but it's very narrow. You know what I mean? So all those guys know each other. They all have
Yeah.
the same coaches. They all got the same friends. They half of them have lived together at one time or another throughout their career, whether it was college, whether it was in Beijing back in the Art of War days. They were all living like 6 in a room.
Yeah.
And when I used to go to train at China Top Team, in the afternoon, I took a nap in somebody's bunk. You know, like we were just 6 dudes in a room taking an afternoon nap before
Yeah.
afternoon session.
That explains why they were so cordial with each other.
Right. So fast forward 3-4 years, everybody's trying to get a spot in the UFC. Well, if you got 12 guys, 8 of them are friends. And the other 4 guys aren't about to argue and be assholes to the most popular or most well-established fighters in that weight class in the country. There's only a handful of dudes that would dare to mouth off that much.
Yeah.
And there's going to be reprisal for that. So let's say that one of those guys mouthed off to Yan Jinping. Yan Jinping may or may not have been the best fighter in the show, but he is probably the most influential in terms of showbiz sphere. There's more to be gained from not annoying him than from annoying him. So all of them just sat around. It's a bunch of guys who are pretty nice people in general, especially that group of guys. They're pretty easy. And
Oh, man.
what were they going to fight each other? They didn't have to cook their own food there. There's no booze. So all of the typical, like when you look at the Ultimate Fighter in the States, all of the places where there's friction, which is the kitchen, or in who's drinking too much or acting up at the pool or whatever, all those things didn't exist here. So what existed? There was no point of friction. So what was the point of the house? You could have just said, it would have been, it's only surpassed in boring viewing by the Indian version that Super Fight League put on like 6 years ago.
Oh, did they? Oh, man, I got to look this up.
Guys and girls, but they all slept in a big room in sleeping bags. Dude,
Super Fight League version of the Ultimate Fighter. That's
yeah.
It's got to be its own kind of amazing right there.
Yeah, they had their games, like their contests were kind of like get along gang games. It was like daycare for fighters.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that up when I go home, man.
Seriously, daycare for fighters. Look that up. You'll probably get Super Fight League popping up. It's hilarious.
Man, So it's interesting you mentioned writing. Let's go back to technique for a minute here, because
Sure.
going back to the Jujitsu narrative, a lot of Jujitsu guys don't even know what you mean by writing, like a side right or a wrist right or a leg right or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
wrestlers will, catch wrestlers will, but a lot of Jujitsu guys are like, what? I don't even know what that is.
I was wrist riding before I even knew the term, before I even knew it was something wrestling. I don't come from a wrestling background,
Yeah.
but it was something that I realized I could do to somebody. And if I did that, they wouldn't be able to power themselves up off the cage wall.
Yeah.
You know, good luck. And that's, if you watch what Khabib is doing, he's doing the same thing that I did to people in practice all the time. And that people that know how to wrestle, like Ben Askren does it.
Yeah.
Ben didn't used to do it. He used to be a jiu-jitsu kind of heavy wrestler. He was using his jiu-jitsu, and he would get like flipped over. He would still win the match, but he would get rolled over. He lost control of guys a lot of times, you know, in Bellator in the beginning. And then he basically just embraced wrestling. And now you can see the way that he controls guys is a lot like Khabib.
Yeah.
They share a lot of things in common. Wrist rides, triangles around the legs, like how they pinch people's, like not lock their knees together, like removing the width of the base, stretching the legs out, leg rides, you know. Instead of going to full mount, they'd rather just be like going to crucifix. And this pounding your face from a less than optimum position for sheer power, but maximum control. Like you have no hope of getting out. And they just torture you. Ben beat up my good friend Sebastian Katastam, you know, here in Shanghai.
Oh, yeah,
It hurt watching it.
I know
man.
him.
It hurt watching it.
Yeah, I saw that fight.
But,
Yeah, Zeb, he's a good guy.
dude, if you're gonna get hit by Zeb, or you're gonna take him down and make it a boring fight, you take him down and you make it a boring fight. You don't risk getting the overhand right or the high kick or whatever's coming your way, because the kid can hit.
Yeah.
So. But they thought that they had an answer for the wrestling, and I almost believed it. And this is the thing. Like you watch Darren Till and Tyron Woodley, and I was like, I can't see how Till wins this. But there's this thing in your head, because you've seen him beat people up before. You're like, he's a big, giant left-hander with excellent timing and distance and more reach and this kind of wide stance. And he's like a giant plus-size Conor McGregor. And you know, you're going to see this happen. It's going to look like that, like McGregor versus Mendez. But then it's not. You forget who you're dealing with. You forget that Tyron Woodley is faster than light. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you forget that his timing is impeccable, and that he's patient. He's beyond patient. Like if it doesn't even occur in the fight, the opening, he just won't take the opening. He takes the fewest risks, and has still a lot of real show-stopping moments, you know? So I think this is going to resemble that a lot. Khabib's not as fast as Woodley or as good with the hands, but it's the same thing. We saw it. We've seen this again and again and again. The person that can wrestle doesn't have to be a master of timing and distance and striking. He just has to cover his chin and get close enough and apply pressure. All he's got to do is apply pressure, and the openings will present themselves.
Yeah.
And I say this as a guy who does not have any wrestling background. I just have decent balance and a good idea of where I don't want to be, you know? And
Yeah, but you're a student of the game, Rob. I mean, you pay attention to things. I remember
yeah.
that's a phrase that stuck in my mind. I actually reffed a fight that Rob did, and his opponent headbutted him. And I remember that very distinctly, because I didn't notice the headbutt, but I did notice Rob called out, "Ramsey, pay attention." I was like,
sorry, man. I got testy. I got testy like that. I didn't have time to
it's
be
not
nice.
Illegal to speak to the referee. It's not illegal.
Yeah, like he did it twice. He did the first time. I thought it was an accident, and then he clipped me again. Like he distinctly wound up and clipped me. I was like, "Yo, dude, I'm being nice to you." I didn't. The other thing is that there was two things. Like I didn't want to. I entered that fight with an injury.
Yeah.
So I had an injury to my knee, and I didn't do the same things that I would normally do from the same stance. So you saw me doing a lot of reverse stance stuff and a lot of leg kicks, and with my left leg as the weapon,
Yeah.
as opposed to my right leg, which is you know, he's a right-hander. I would just normally butcher his leg from the outside real heavy. But my left leg had a problem. My left knee had a problem. So I kicked with it instead of using it as a base.
Right.
Because the first time I fell down in the fight, he rushed me, and my leg gave out. And I was like, okay, like I'm not saying it got injured there. Like, it got injured previously, like a week earlier. But I was like, the other thing was, I didn't think we were allowed to use elbows, because the event before, there was some confusion with the elbows.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember watching you thinking, like, why isn't he dropping elbows? He could just light this guy up and finish right now if he just threw those elbows.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
There was some miscommunication about that before the fight.
Yeah, so, and I'm glad I didn't, because you know what? We didn't, well, part of me wants, like, yeah, bang, bang, highlight, everything's amazing. And that's what my corner was screaming for. But I got to say something that maybe other people might disagree with, or I might get some flack for, but the event had a certain, I was struck by the ugly spectacle of it while I was in the cage. So a bunch of thoughts went through my mind. One was that I started, like, my first fights were televised and syndicated fights against the best people the country had to offer.
Yeah, with thousands and thousands of people watching. They're live and millions more on TV, yeah.
Right. And I've done this kind of stuff, and win or lose, I always felt comfortable with the situation, even though I was totally outgunned sometimes, or taken, you know, like, short notice, or whatever the case. I always felt comfortable with it. I was always like, you know what, that's great. I was not used to being the guy who was the big gun and getting fed. And I felt dirty. And I don't mean that to belittle my opponent. He was surprisingly tough, because I just wanted to kick him in the legs and finish it. I didn't want to kick him in the head. With the fight before, we saw a disparity, a physical disparity, you know? And all I saw at the end of that fight was my very good friend kicking my other, you know, good acquaintance. And I'm like, that's all I saw. But I look at the crowd, and the crowd's baying for blood. And it's not a big place. It's small, so it's very personal. And, you know, and I'm like, these guys are all baying for blood. You got a whole bunch of foreigners, you know, drinking alcohol in this venue. It's a small venue, and they're baying for blood. And I'm like, and they're wanting me to beat this kind of undersized opponent up. Like, it's the first time where I'm so much bigger than this dude. And, like, experience-wise and power-wise. So we weighed the same, but we're not the same size.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I could see that, man. If you saw these two, I wish I could pull it up on the screen here, but see these two side by side, you think one of these guys is much more athletic than the other.
One guy's likely to get hurt, and he's so tough. And, like, he had so much admiration from me after the fight, because I was like, they had to help him down from the ring. Like, they helped him to backstage. They had to help him around. I suspect that he didn't walk with comfort for some weeks thereafter, because I kicked his leg repeatedly and repeatedly.
I had the closest seat in the house besides yours, man. I saw that. It's like, oh
yeah,
man.
like, you know, I admired him for his guts, you know, and I had his back, and I would hit him in the back of the jaw. I'm like, I'm gonna hit him a couple more times. He's gonna tap. He's got to tap. None of these guys are gonna. Bam! I hit him, and he just keeps fighting. And I think that he thought it was like to the death or something. Like, I don't believe that he understood that he can tap and get out. And maybe that's for the best.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get the best performance, is when you don't think that it'll stop just because you want out.
There's also a stigma in mixed martial arts against tapping to strikes, because people seem to think it's dishonorable, which is so weird.
Dude.
It's so weird, because if you're eating like 12 strikes,
you can be in a position where you tap the strikes, and I bet you're going to see that this weekend.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Oh, you're going to see that this week.
Let's talk about that fight, man.
I know these things.
Okay.
I see the things a long way out. And I'm wrong sometimes, and people have told me I got a blind spot when it comes to McGregor fights.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm interested to see whether I still have that blind spot, because I have a lot of admiration for him. And the things that I noticed aren't the knockouts.
Okay.
It's some of the setup that he uses. It's where people aren't reading what he's capable of, so they're misunderstanding where they're safe and not safe. So at any time, you and I, let's say we're sparring, you think there's a distance that you're safe at.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I'm safe here. But you do something, and I'll be like, I'll be caught off guard because I misunderstood where your feet were. I saw where they were, but I misunderstood what that meant to you.
Right.
Right. That's what's happening with Conor. And I mean, all the mental stuff aside, he uses the mental stuff as a smokescreen to hide excellent technique from being discovered until it's too late. So all the insults, all the crap, this is partially to keep all of us interested. That's the political aspect.
Yeah.
It's just like a political
it's the
circus.
heel-face dynamic again.
Right, except that I wish that politicians would throw on small gloves and get down to business, because that's what they really. Everything
Amen
else is
to that, right.
everything is a proxy for this. Sports is all these ball sports are a proxy for a cage and some small gloves. Boom. What kind of a fighter do you think LeBron would be? That'd be ridiculous. How good would Kobe Bryant or what was that guy? Anthony Mason. You remember him from the 90s? Anthony Mason.
Oh, man.
I think he played for the Knicks or something. He had huge shoulders, massive. He's like a 6'6" action figure of a basketball player. Can you imagine this as a heavyweight that has been doing mixed martial arts? And those are the guys that are coming. John Jones is the skinny runt of his family, and look what he's doing. So you can figure out when NFL guys start choosing different routes before they go to football.
Man, that'd be interesting. It's hard to wrap your mind around how big some of these guys are until you stand next to them.
Yeah, massive.
And I remember back in the 90s, I was in Argentina and saw this very large black American guy, giant, like 7 feet tall, and I'm like, that's unusual in this country.
Until you see a 7-footer, you have no idea.
And he walks up to me and introduced himself because he's like, "Hey, y'all American?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he introduced himself. I didn't recognize his name, and he seemed kind of shocked I didn't. He turned out to be a basketball player for the Charlotte Hornets. I don't remember his name, and he was shocked I didn't know. Like, y'all don't watch basketball?
Exactly.
So I was like, sorry, I'm kind of a nerd, not really into sports that much. And but yeah, just this is how I looked up and just staring up into the sky like, this guy is a giant. This guy is a giant.
When I was in college, there was a basketball player on the college team that was 6'11". And we had the biggest player on our volleyball team was 6'7". We had a couple of 6'6" guys and whatever. And then there was the little rats like me were 6'2" only. And that guy was 6'11". He was a bit of a uncoordinated compared to the other guys, so he wasn't making the most of it. Then you start understanding how big that is, though. When you see the really coordinated guys, when you look at an NBA game, you're forgetting that the average guy on the court is 6'6", 6'7" anyway.
Yeah.
They're huge people. These are all the top end athletic specimens of the anomalies size-wise. It's an entire different population. They live amongst us. They're like us, but not of us. It's not the same thing. And some guys, others are people that are running, and you're like, yeah, I'm a decent runner. I thought I was in high school and stuff. There's guys that I have no idea how he was jumping like that or how he's running. I could really jump. I was a good jumper. And then I saw the best youth in the league and in the country, the best youth in the country. And I was like, okay, well, if this guy is in the top few in our age bracket in the country, I'm not even close. Like this there's no, I like this game, but I don't like it that much. I don't think I'm going to come back to this.
Yeah, it's interesting. About a century ago, in sports, all sports, it was commonly believed that there was an ideal body type for all sports generally. And obviously that's not the case. I mean, having extra long arms and a large torso, as Michael Phelps showed, is ideal for swimming, and having super long legs is great for taekwondo and so on and so forth. But which got me to thinking.
And then every now and again, there's somebody who totally proves all this wrong. There's some stubby champion somewhere who's an absolute you're like, how is he? And he does it, and he just hearts his way through and grinds his way through, especially in fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But begs the question, like, is there an ideal body shape for mixed martial arts? It's just something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Like,
I don't think it's so much about the body shape with mixed martial arts, because it's not one dimensional. If it was boxing
Right.
or if it was wrestling, you could say yes. But because there's so many ways to win, it's about how well you take what you have and find a way to work it to your advantage. So, is there an ideal? Sure. The guy who's got super isometric strength and great explosive strength, and he's got flexibility, a high degree of joint flexibility. Now, we're talking things that are often very different. Explosive strength, joint flexibility, like the two things are, most guys that are real explosive aren't really flexible. It's kind of funny, but let's say that the guy is both. And then he's got amazing hand-eye coordination, and he's got longer legs than most, and a little bit heavier, denser bones than most, and lower fat ratio, high muscle density and low fat ratio. And come on, a huge heart, his chest has to be shaped a certain way, large lungs and aerobic capacity. Who has all this stuff? Like, the guy who's got aerobic capacity typically isn't the fastest guy, or if he is fast, like Kelvin Gastelum's fast enough and he's got aerobic capacity, but he doesn't have the reach and the height, and his body's totally atypical.
Yeah.
You meet him and you're like, this is the guy that's fighting Anderson Silva? Anderson is like my size, and well, he was supposed to fight Anderson. He ended up fighting Bisping and knocking him out, right? But
big upset at the UFC China show, man.
When I met Kelvin, I was stunned, because I knew he wasn't big, but I didn't think he was that short. And you start realizing that a lot of the stats that we get, those stats are tweaked a bit. They say he's 5'9" or 5'10", or he's probably 5'7". He felt like it to me. He was not big. Maybe I'm underestimating my size, because I was like, I don't think this cat can touch me. Well, I would be wrong, because he would mow over me. But, I mean, he'd just be so fast and aggressive, right? And you see how he moves on people. And he found a way to close the gap, even though he's shorter, right? He's got an enormous chest, by the way. Like, it's a totally weird build.
Especially because he's shorter, because he's dealt with that situation so much.
He's got an enormous chest with I'm sure, oversized heart, like an enormous heart. You know what I mean? And like huge lungs and stuff. I look at myself. I'm able to put on a lot of muscle, but people are like, why don't you bulk up and go up to a heavier weight class? And I'm like, man, I've spent most of my career trying to come down, like lose muscle distinctly. Not quality of muscle, but lose size. I was bigger than this before. My lungs and heart couldn't support it. My joints got hurt easy. Like, I could punch the bag and sprain my wrist, like that kind of shit. I'm like, well, what's the point of walking around at like a lean 102 kilos? There's no point to that if my frame and my system can't support it.
I mean, that's something that Jack Dempsey was preaching 100 years ago. It's not about your muscle. You got to weigh your skeleton, because that's what's going to determine your proper weight class. But man, it's amazing. Yeah. People have forgotten that to a great degree, and they're like, I mean, I fought in 4 different weight classes across 5 different combat sports, and
you fought too light for your own good at some points.
Yeah. Oh man, 145 was way too light. So yeah, some of those weight classes were not optimal.
And I think that a lot of the weight cutting, everything we view everything in hindsight, but a lot of the ways that weight was cut, I don't mean just with you, because I don't know how you were cutting weight, but I know how. I know that I didn't often, and then when I learned to, I was good at cutting it, but I wasn't good at putting it back on the water correctly.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of things. Like, if I knew what I know now, in 2007, I'd probably have a record of about 10-0. You know what I mean? Like 20-0. Just simply because of nobody here was cutting weight. Nobody understood about cutting weight.
Oh, yeah.
Until a year or two ago, I would still get questions from much better or accomplished fighters but they were asking me about cutting weight because they saw me cut weight before and then put it back on. And I'm like, man, I had
they'd
to
never
go
seen
searching.
anything like that.
I had to go searching. The Chinese weren't cutting weight. They were
And
like,
a lot of the fight shows, they wouldn't even weigh in. They just line you up and say, all right, you're close to the same size.
Yeah,
you
right.
can fight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, man, weight cutting, that's one of those things that got introduced to Chinese combat sports.
Yeah, yeah. They were like,
better or worse.
basically, like, if the guy was over, they're like, do you mind? And the other guy's like, no. Oh, okay, good. It's just a kilo, whatever.
Yeah.
1-2 kilos. They didn't care. Plus minus 1-2 kilos. They didn't care. Now, plus minus a couple 100 grams, dudes are losing their mind. Managers are not happy. The organization is like going, you sure you want to do this? You want to make him lose the extra 300 grams, And I'm like, my guy's fine. Your guy took a 12-hour detour because of the weather. I'll allow it. And I got flack for that. So I'm not going to go into the details, but let's just say that if your guy had a 6-hour head start on regaining his water and had made weight at 11, and the other guy showed up at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the evening and was trying to make weight and was 300 grams over, 500 grams over, would you, there's that 500 gram allowance, right?
Yeah.
And then he was like 800 grams over the set weight class. Would you be like, oh, you got to lose it? No, my guy has hours of head start and comfort. This guy's been in transit for an extra day because of the fog and stuff, right? Like 2 years ago. So when I saw that, I was like, never mind, man. I just feel bad for this kid. Not hoping he beats my guy, but it's supposed to be a fair fight. Yeah. I'm not going to send you to the sauna now,
Good for you, man.
No, it's
a rare thing these days.
Man, people were out for blood though, so I just had to, I had to learn where I belong, maybe that's not my call to make, but.
Yeah. Man, so going back to Khabib versus Conor, I don't think we answered that question. The fans are probably.
I just ran off on a tangent. I'm the king of tangents.
Tangents are good. I like tangents. It's all good. But man, I get asked this question a lot in the comments of my YouTube videos, and I gave a answer a while back that I think people were pretty disappointed in, which was something along the lines of, it's probably going to be a fairly disappointing fight, and here's why. This was my prediction. Either Conor is going to knock out Khabib pretty early on, which is what most people are
not
expecting.
Going to be disappointed by that at all.
Okay, maybe not.
Right.
Or Khabib's going to wrestle him down and beat him up on the floor.
Yeah.
One of those two things. It's probably not going to be Conor McGregor, doing a judo throw or something. And
either way, somebody is going to be proclaimed as massively overrated and I knew it and he's a can, and it's going to be all that talk. And the truth is that it's just the way the games line up. And you're absolutely right. It's going to be one or the other.
So which one do you think it's going to be, man?
Dude, it's cage, some decent defense going on, but it's not going to amount to a hill of beans in the end. By about 1 minute 20, maybe second round. Let's say that it gets to second round without going to the ground, because if Khabib can stay standing for a round, I think it tips massively in his favor, because then he goes back to the corner to digest what just happened.
Okay.
And he has to input. He has to digest the coach's input. That's really important.
Oh, yeah.
Is being able to digest the coach's input and having a coach that has input. I've been in situations where coaches had nothing to tell me, and I didn't appreciate it. They weren't really coaches; they're just cornermen, friends who were gracious enough to hold my water bottle and towel and yell encouragement. But
it's kind of shocking how many people don't know the difference between a teacher, a coach, and a corner man. Yeah.
And a true coach is supposed to be. Also, what I'm missing is a psychologist. I could probably use a sports psychologist, or maybe just a psychoanalyst in general. But yeah, a sports psychologist for sure.
Yeah, man. Where do you find one of those guys in Shanghai?
I think that there's some expensive clinics that have some people that can help. But
Yeah.
about sports psychology, I don't know about getting like performance out of athletes, especially combat athletes. That's something totally different, I think.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
indeed.
The emotions that go into it are far different. But back to your question, because I still haven't answered it,
Right.
about Khabib and Conor.
We'll get back to sports psychology because that's interesting.
In my mind's eye, I see the fight ending. Whatever happens there, I think, yeah, Conor will hit him. But people keep on, you keep on getting replays of him hitting other guys at 145. And when
Yeah.
there's a few things playing into this. And it sounds like I'm making excuses for why he's going to lose. And I can't say he is going to lose, but how I see it happening is him getting ground out and beaten down. I see like a replay of what happened to Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson is a wrestler, with left-handed also, with
Okay.
decent power. He also tagged Khabib. He also is known for knocking people out when he hits them. He's
Right.
not as sophisticated with the setups as Conor. That's the main difference. Conor fought at 145 a lot. And that's where all these highlight reel knockouts, except for Eddie Alvarez, that's all 145. Eddie is basically a really, really thick guy, but height and lengthwise and reach-wise, he's also 145. He's also Dennis Seaver. He's also, you see what I'm getting at? Like, those aren't equal frames for the game that they're playing,
Right.
right? Khabib is an equal frame for the game he's playing, and he's thicker. But he's the same size. He's the same height. He's the same reach. Like there's a lot of things that aren't really appreciated when you just look at highlight reels.
Yeah, that's an interesting variable, especially considering Conor in the teeny tiny division has generally been bigger than his opponents.
He's a giant. He's way bigger than Jose Aldo.
Yeah.
So, and Jose was considered big when he started in that division. They're like, wow, look how much he cuts. Oh, he's huge. He's having trouble making the weight and blah. All these things. That was what was said about Jose. Conor's way bigger. Why did he look like a walking skeleton before at every weigh-in? He used to in 145. Why was why he never defended? Well, you can get a lot of reasons why he never defended, but the truth is that the last event that he fought in at 145, which was Aldo, right?
Right.
That was the last event that the UFC allowed IV rehydration.
Oh, really?
Yes. It never gets discussed.
Coincidence?
It never it gets discussed, and I think that it's a much bigger factor.
Yeah, I've never ever heard anybody discuss that before,
Ever.
but yeah, it's starting to make sense.
But I notice these things.
I think you're onto something, Rob.
Yeah. I'm just, I don't know whether that's the reason, but I believe it's a
definitely a
contributing
reason,
factor.
yeah.
Yeah. It's for sure it's a contributing factor. You mean I can't really get all my minerals back? I can't get all the water back? I can't cushion my brain?
Yeah.
Like you remember how sunken his cheeks were, where his eyes
Oh,
were?
yeah.
His eyes were way back in his
What
head.
weight was he walking around at back then? Do you know?
He was
Probably like 170?
170?
Yeah.
Easily 170. So when people always say, oh, he went up 2 weight classes to fight Nate Diaz, I'm like, no, that's a talking point. Nate Diaz is a 155 pounder, a big 155, but he's a 155 who doesn't miss weight at 155, who just didn't cut.
Yeah.
He fought last minute and didn't cut. So what you got is a guy who fought somebody in the class that he is now in.
Yeah. Man, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, cutting from 170 to 145 without IVs to rehydrate sucks, and you're going to feel like garbage.
Yeah, that's a bad deal. And I mean, there's different kinds of cutting, and I don't know whether this has been explained on your podcast. I think most people don't really explain it in general.
Yeah.
They talk about cutting, but when they say how much weight does he cut,
Yeah.
does that mean from 3 months out? Does that mean from 2 weeks out? Are we talking about weight? Like, is he trying to lose muscle to make the weight class? Is he trying to lose fat to make the weight class? Or is
Are we
he just
exclusively
cutting
talking about water weight and the contents
Right.
of your bowels?
Which is not insignificant. The average person, walking around midday is carrying a couple kilos of crap in them.
Yeah.
So,
Up to 9 pounds.
yeah.
Up to 9 pounds. That's significant. I mean, that's like a whole weight class right there.
Right?
Yeah.
So, if you look at the things that are, if you properly eat in the weeks preceding the fight and you're working out enough, you're going to start losing weight anyway. If you water load, you're going to lose more weight when you come off. So ideally, the weight drop that you experience when people say, oh, weight, being lost fight week, that's not 3-4 days of weight loss. And I see guys like professional athletes, and they're losing stuff from a week out. Like they're losing water. They're starting to look sunken. I'm like, you need to be drinking more. Your actual weight should not, the composition of your body should change, but your weight should not change. In fact, if anything, 4 days out, I weigh more than I did a week before. And then at about the 3-day mark, you start to see the change because you stop.
Is that because of water
loading? Stop eating. Yeah, you stop. Right. You stop with the salt. The salt has to start leaving you about 4 days out, and the water starts going out, and you keep drinking, and you keep flushing salt, and then when you stop drinking, you pee out.
Yeah.
So in the last day and a half, let's say you don't drink water, most of it's peeing out. You don't sit in the sauna. There's guys that are like, oh, I did 2 hours in the sauna. I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh man, avoid the sauna
4
as
hours
much as
in the
you
sauna,
can.
45-minute session in the sauna. I'm like, nah, dude, the sauna is for touch-ups. The sauna is the morning of, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of things, I don't use a sauna. I haven't for many years. I didn't use a sauna. I used a sauna once. I think
Good, it's better that way.
Because in the sauna, you're breathing hot air. You're baking the alveoli. How do you say the little cauliflowers in your lungs? Those little things that you study in health class.
What are they called? The cilia, maybe?
No. Cilia are the hairs in your throat that move mucus.
Okay.
The alveoli, I think.
Probably.
Anyway, the things that create that suck the oxygen out of the air. These little sacs in your lungs. You're baking those little things if you're sitting in the sauna for an extended period of time. 2, you're baking your brain. You're trying to exhaust yourself of water with which to sweat. Sweat is what cools you, and sweat is why you sit in the sauna, so that you're cleansing your cooling system. You're flushing your cooling system like you would in a car.
Right.
So if you're not replenishing with water, like when you're cutting for a fight, you're getting less and less water in your cooling system.
Yeah.
And so, dude, there's less in your brain. You start to bake yourself. Bake your brain. You're baking your joints, whatever. So I would rather boil myself and leave my brain out in the cool air, get in a really, really hot tub, like as hot as I can take it, with as much salt as I can inside, and let osmosis do work for me.
Yeah.
And so you can do like an easy 10, 15 minutes in the tub. You come out, you're 2 kilos lighter. People are, it's magic. And I'm like, no, it's science. See, I'm going to sleep.
Yeah, man, I did a few sauna cuts back in the day. Like, did this fight for martial combat. I got some misinformation about the weight class. I was told it was going to be a catch weight at 165.
I might have seen
like
that
170,
fight. I might have seen
175.
that fight. Yeah, martial combat.
Yeah, and
they treated us nice there.
They did, and it wasn't miscommunication from them. It was miscommunication from the guy I was working with at the time.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Told me it was a catch weight. Turned out it was 145, so I ended up having 24 hours to cut from 175 to 145.
You fought a high-end guy too, like a high-end Jiu-Jitsu guy with very cage savvy in his home base. Yeah.
So I got to tell you, hours of sitting in a sauna is it can kill you. It can kill you. I felt like death. I felt like, even at 100%.
He ended up having some fights in the UFC.
He did. Landrisa, tough dude. Even at 100%, that fight wouldn't have gone well for me.
Well, it wasn't a good fight. We have some things in common, that we took some wooden nickels, for fights. We took some fights that we took out of the warrior spirit in our heart, but maybe we weren't in the. I won't say that you can't win the fight. It's that with the level of preparation that we had at the time, with our coaching, and just the situation was not ideal for you to enter an uphill battle of that nature.
Yeah, I get it, man. I get it. But
You
man,
can pass this on, like all this stuff that we learn. Now it's time for us to somehow, and you've done this already, which I'm rather impressed with the enhancements in this gym.
Oh,
And,
thanks, man.
You've been passing on the knowledge to the people that are just starting out, and giving them the mental tools. You know what I mean? There's more to it than technique and belts. It's
Oh man,
mental
so much
tools,
more to it.
and it's outlook on the sport, on the game, and on yourself. And so, the things that we took lumps for made us grow, and we put ourselves in positions where we're not comfortable, so that we can grow.
Yeah, man. All of those fights, I took a bunch of fights throughout my career, kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA, that I realized I do not stand a good chance of winning this fight.
Yeah.
And I took it for whatever reason. I needed the money or I just had a hard time saying no. But I would watch those fights again and again and again and again, trying to answer one question: what could I have done differently to win in an ideal world? How do I win that fight?
Yeah.
And asking that question and being able to find that answer, I think, has made me a much better coach than I could have been otherwise.
Does it plague you?
Sometimes. I mean, it has. Like the one that really plagued me, my first
Like
professional.
haunt you, like you.
Yeah, my first Muay Thai fight. I got knocked out in like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
By this dude who just steamrolled me.
Yeah.
And he was heavier. He was a lot more experienced. It was one of those. And this was back in the U.S. And yeah, that one plagued me. That one I was just like, at first I just wanted to brush it off like, yeah, that was an unwinnable fight. Just move on. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. I was like, man, what could I have done?
Mm.
And today, looking back, I think if I could go back and coach myself with enough time and preparation, that could have been a winnable fight. But back then, I couldn't see the way. Now I can.
Yeah.
So
I brood on stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that makes me watch fight tapes of the people that I have to fight. If there's an upcoming fight and I can find tape, I watch. I arrange them in chronological order.
Okay.
And a lot of guys, they're like, I don't want to see my opponent. I let my coaches tell me. Or I'm like, well, seeing as I don't actually have coaches per se, I got advisors. I got people that make sure that I'm not alone there at the event. That's all I have.
Yeah.
So I'm not just going to do what my coach says because I don't have a coach. I got guys that are going to give me generic advice about how they, with a dramatically different background, skill set, physical structure, whatever, would go about this fight.
Yeah.
So basically nobody can coach me except me, unless I have a coach who understands me, which means that we have to grow together and they have to help me. I can't just have somebody come and go, okay, I'm going to coach you.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would not want to do a film study if they had the opportunity. I mean,
Right.
that's such a valuable
Some
tool.
guys don't. And a lot of teams, a lot of prominent fighters, a lot of people who are making decent money still don't. And you can tell the difference in the UFC. And some people say, "Are you kidding? Everybody does film studies. Everybody's got a nutritionist." No, everybody doesn't.
Yeah.
They're still basic. Like, okay, if you look at the NBA and you look at the NFL. The NFL having 40-something players on a team, I don't know how many exactly, right?
Yeah.
They've got lines. They got so many different plays. They got it's looking at a playbook is like looking at a chess master's handbook,
Right.
And you start to recognize that there's patterns. So
Right.
if the Giants are playing the Houston Oilers or whatever, there's a team of people in the back who never put on pads in their life, but they understand the game. And they're sitting there with a pen, paper, and a telestrator, and they're going over and they're seeing how, and they build a big giant spreadsheet. And this is how Mark Cuban changed the NBA. Oddly enough, this is a story because he came from football.
Really?
Well, he owned shares, I believe, in some football thing. And what he did was he understood how football was analyzed. So he took these bean counters. Basically, they're accountants who love football. And he had them draw up giant spreadsheets with all conceivable cross references of criteria and action. Right. And then they started doing a probability based on what? Based on the situation and based on the time sheet, like the is it first quarter, second quarter? Are you ahead or behind at the second quarter? Are you ahead or behind at the third? So did he throw or run when he was ahead? Did he throw or run when he was behind? Did he throw or run with close coverage, wide coverage? When they were playing this with an exceptional strong front line, he threw every time because he didn't want to get crushed. He's chicken shit. He throws the ball real fast, too fast. He's releasing too quick. How many of those were ended in mistakes? Now you start looking at how many yards were gained throwing versus running, and then you start to build a probability chart about what you have to do, not based on what you feel, not based on something that you noticed with your eye and your heart and your emotions, but raw data, something that a computer could tell you is like, your best odds are that you'll be ahead at the half if for the first two quarters you play high pressure on the outside and like a center push, just like something visible, make him throw. You start to do that, and then the guy's going to fold. So I'm just giving an example in football terms. Now he took this to basketball. Fewer players, much easier to analyze than football in terms of the number of outcomes. Is the point guard have the ball? How many times coming down the court does the point guard, the guy who's designated the point guard, have the ball? Okay, so now as the point guard, is he going left or is he going right? And when he does, how quickly is he passing off? And how much pressure is there? So what do you need to do to make him pass the ball? What's the probability that he passes to Jordan? Well, the probability that he passes to Jordan right away is high. So then you just chart that one guy. So now they have a guy on each of the 5 players and one guy on the 6th man on the bench. So it takes a team of 6 analysts just watching game after game, and they don't care about the rest of it. They only watch what this one guy does when he has the ball or when he doesn't. Where does he go? What is he doing? They just watch one dude. And that's the amount, right? So now the amount of sorry to dominate this minute, but
go ahead.
It's a long minute. But
it's your podcast, man. You're here for a reason.
The amount of effort that goes into mapping something that's going to happen on Monday night and be over by Tuesday, and they will happen again next week. Those guys are doing that every single week. They're analyzing another team.
Yeah.
They know what their schedule is for the next season. They're analyzing all these teams. They're paying attention to all of them. So the amount of data, all those teams are playing constantly. The amount of data that they have to analyze that quarterback or that point guard with is immense. So we have comparatively little data, but the advantage is we only have one guy to handle. And it's one guy in the same setting, the octagon or the cage, right? One guy that's fighting one man. He's not fighting two men. There's not a different the format is the same. Is the guy left-handed? Is he right-handed? He has 2 gloves. The rules are the same. Everything. So we have fewer variables in that respect.
Yet how many people are charting these things? How many people are taking down that empirical data?
So now how many fights has Khabib had that are televised? Now this is the part that scares me, is that I honestly believe there's only 3 or 4 camps in the UFC, like coaches, who actually take it to this level, and they don't speak about it. But I'm coming to this conclusion based on the way that they speak about their opponents. I believe that Greg Jackson does this. I don't believe Winklejohn has anything to do with that. I believe Greg Jackson specifically does this for opponents.
Seems like he would.
And I believe that Dominic Cruz probably watches opponents like this.
Seems like the kind of guy who would, yeah.
And I don't know whether Javier Mendez does, but I suspect that he has somebody who does this. Now, I don't know how this works with Khabib. The Russians that I've met do not necessarily have that outlook about fighting. look at it as like a formula. But I start to see people don't change that much. Why? Because no matter how much I want to lie to myself, I have the same basic tendencies as I had the very first fight.
That is fascinating to think about.
No matter how much I've worked on it, I've become a vastly different fighter. Visually, technique-wise, I'm much improved. Everything's changed. But the Achilles heel is still the same. And when under pressure, the same crack appears in the same fucking place.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
So now you look at who cracks where.
Yeah.
Look at where Conor has cracked in previous fights. Look where Khabib has cracked. Wait, he hasn't. So
gotta
now
look for those long-term tendencies.
Yeah, you got to look at tendencies.
Yeah, not specific techniques, but tendencies over time that stick, yeah.
Stipe versus DC. I called DC well in advance. Everybody's like, okay, well, you're just calling DC because he's a brother and, you're black, he's black, blah, blah. I'm like, no. I'm just overlapping two fighters in my head. Given the information that I'm doing it cursorily. I'm not spending 3 weeks watching every fight 5 times. But I overlap it, and I'm like, I see DC knocking him out. I see it going very much like some of DC's fights did in Strikeforce. I see Strikeforce DC.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we saw.
Man, after this conversation, I'm going to go home and do a film study on myself looking for long-term habits. See, we were saying that, I just kept thinking about this thing I always do with my right hand.
What do you do with your right hand?
Well, it's something I do when I throw the jab, and it's light, it's subtle. It's just that human tendency to lower as you move the other hand forward to bring this one down, and it's something everybody fights with. Yeah.
My very first fight I did, I threw 2 lefts and opened my chin, got chopped on the chin, knocked down, and then soccer kicked.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're doing. It's my tendency. It's not that anymore because I covered that.
Right.
But now what I do is my hands still aren't high enough. I think they're high enough. Somehow in the fight, we think our hands are higher than they are. Right?
Oh, because it's work keeping them up.
And they're not. Here's the thing: is that I don't actually think that I fight better with my hands up. I try to humor certain people who have a classical boxing background, who sometimes are either in my corner or are coaching or giving advice. Where they're like, "Oh, you got to keep them up here," and it's safer. But for martial arts, as soon as you can kick an elbow, I think that all that goes out the window.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe
as soon as you understand what the position of the lead foot relative to your opponent's lead foot means, you can fight hands down.
I don't know about hands down, but I fight hands out more.
Yeah.
And I think I have much better ability to fight hands out by concentrating on trapping and parrying.
Okay.
And using that to also lie about distance. So touching. I do more of this stuff than I used to. I used to okay, I'm going to be Rampage or Vanderlei or whoever. And I used to just pick somebody. He's my size. That's what's going to happen. We're gonna throw like this. I'm going to come in, and I wasn't looking at the subtleties of their game, because even though they're goons or whatever in overall terms, there's still some things that allow them to be goons.
Yeah.
Rampage isn't Rampage without the iron chin. Right? Vanderlei isn't Vanderlei without the iron fists. So if you don't have, a lot of people that become champions, they're not necessarily the best fighters. They're not technically sound. They're maybe not strategically sound. Some of them have, they just have, physical anomalies that, amazing chins. You can't take that Diaz punishment. I can't.
Man, that's not something that lasts, though.
No, but, you're here for a good time, not a long time. At least that's when you're 30 years old, you believe that. By the time you get up over that, then you start considering it, right?
Yeah.
The first time you slur a word after a hard sparring session, you'll rethink it. That's what I've told people before. I didn't have a problem from a fight. I had no problem from a fight, but I had a sparring session once where afterwards my tongue felt thick.
Ooh.
And I was like, that's not a good sign.
No, it's not.
I couldn't do tongue twisters after that. And
really?
For 3 days after that, I was just kind of in a bit of a fog. So I was basically, I would say I had a concussion. I wasn't knocked out. I didn't fall down. I didn't get knocked down. I got hit, and it felt like somebody poured hot water down my neck. And I was like, that's not a good sign.
That's a weird feeling.
Why would I do that, right?
Yeah.
I found myself searching for words that were always on the tip of my tongue.
I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I'm still there, actually, to be honest. After my last fight, it left me like,
I was uncomfortable about that fight when it was announced.
Yeah.
And it's not a slight to you. I was just not.
That makes sense, man.
I did what I do, which is overlay two people. I'm like, okay, so this fight's announced. I'm like, I got my own problems, win or lose, whatever. But I got my own problems. But this is not I wouldn't make that fight. And then I remember there was another fight where a kid who was making his pro debut was fighting Juma Bieka.
Oh, man, I remember that one, that tall, kind of skinny Chinese kid. It was his very first pro fight.
He's a pro fighter now. He's training in AKA Thailand, like pretty much 8-9 months of the year he's in Thailand. But
good for him.
Yeah, he had all the makings of like a superstar. He's lean as hell, like probably 6% body fat. Good range, super rangy for the weight class, right? He's a 145er. He's 1.88 meters tall. He's got good structure, broad shoulders, long arms and legs. Excellent mechanics.
Yeah, that guy needed to be paired up with an 0-0 fighter just like him. Dude, but man, matchmaking terrible.
At least not 18-0.
Yeah.
Like a guy who's like trying to get into the UFC. So who made the match? And they're like, yeah, well, he accepted it. I'm like, you can't offer it. How do you offer it?
I mean, that's what fighters do. They accept the match.
We accept
what we do.
whatever. We accept whatever. It's up to a coach or a manager. And this is the whole thing. In the beginning, we didn't have coaches, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it's just like, well, you're gonna make a couple thousand RMB. I'm like, yeah, but you might forget the letter Q. That's fucking stupid. Why would you do that? So like, same thing with me. Why would I fight Bao Li Gao? Because I was like, I didn't know any better. I didn't even know what. You want to know something? When I went to that first fight, I had never seen grown men hit each other with 4-ounce gloves.
Really? I'd never seen an MMA fight?
I'd never been to an MMA. I'd seen thousands of MMA fights, just never in person.
Oh, yeah, man, that makes a difference. There's one thing seeing on TV and another thing like being right up there and seeing it in real life in 3D.
Man, I was fight 11 of 12.
Yeah.
11 of 12. It was distinctly split between the heavy side, the heavy hitters, the favorites, and the challengers, the dressing rooms. And they didn't have separate dressing rooms for like debriefing rooms. The warm-up room was also where the guys came back. So by the time I was warming up, that place looked like MASH on a bad day, man.
Yeah.
It was nothing but bandages, blood, puke buckets, and water from ice, and Muay Thai oil, and God,
that must have done a number on your mind, man.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I never had smaller balls than when I walked out that time. That was, my heart was in my throat, man. It's terrifying. And people go, well, why'd you go back? I go, because I didn't like the way it felt. I was not comfortable that I was that uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I was like, how is it that something this, and I realized after a few that I got a little more used to it because I was able to rationalize it. But it's not the fear of the opponent. It's the fear of not performing. Okay. And that's why I sit awake and think about the things that surround the fight situation more than I think about the opponent now.
That makes perfect sense, man.
So the conditions that you enter, that when you travel to that city, because you're never at home almost, right? And even if you are, what are the conditions? What are the things that set you off? If somebody asks you a stupid question in an interview, or somebody yells something, do you hear it? Does it play with you? Does it mess with you? Are you hypersensitive while you're cutting weight? Are you like, your perception, this guy's fucking with me, he's messing with me, the promotion, they're slighting me? Or are you happy with the money? If you're unhappy with the money that you're being paid, with your show money, if you're unhappy with your show money, you're in the wrong game. Like why would you do it? You see what I mean? So if it makes you just not want to be there. All these things make you not want to be there. And I realized that. I was like, wow, that was weak. What happened? Oh, you didn't have somebody to remind you that this is what you drink right before you go out. sorry, this is what you do. This is your order of warming up, because they switched around the card at last minute. Like, this all these things have happened to me.
Yeah.
So you have to start thinking, what messes with you?
Yeah.
And
Fighting
now,
is so much about trying to bring order to the chaos.
you have to be your own coach, Ramsey.
Yeah.
You got to be your own coach. I have to be my own coach. And the problem in Shanghai is that, and now I speak about this like personal stuff, is that the problem in Shanghai is that everybody is, it's always been this way. Like everybody's got an ego or wants to somehow benefit monetarily from the situation. So
Yes.
as soon as somebody's good enough, they go and open their own gym. I watch guys train at a gym and they got a belt or two and then they're gone. And they've got their own little gym somewhere in a basement somewhere. They got their own, everything's opening. And I'm like, but my idea is that Shanghai could be a powerhouse like anywhere else if, I mean, when anywhere else, I mean like Beijing, Manila,
Yeah. One of these.
Harbin has strong teams, all
But
these
it's
places,
not.
right?
But why?
It's not. You got life here. First of all, square meters are too expensive.
True.
So if you want to talk about just the
Real
the
estate
fact
wise,
is real estate is ridiculous.
probably
we don't have a
the
sporting
most
culture.
expensive city in China as far
Close
as
to
real
it.
estate goes.
Yeah, probably, or pretty close. Anyway, Beijing's also really expensive, but the problem is that Beijing has a sporting culture. So you
Right.
have a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of government assistance, and a lot of pride in sports.
Yeah.
Shanghai has a lot of pride in money, art, and fine wines that they sip while looking over the Bund. So,
Right.
they got history and they've got a lot of foreign interaction, and there's a number of things they'd rather do than watch two guys try to knock each other senseless.
Right.
And I think that this reflects in the amount of money or effort that's going to be awarded to fight promotions and the fight culture in general. And it grows, but it grows in terms of as an exercise.
Yeah.
So that you get a whole bunch of people and they don't know the difference between Zumba and Muay Thai, but whatever, man. It's all exercise, and that's what they're there for.
I laugh because I have a friend who does both, but
Yeah.
it's one thing. What we're talking about is making me think of is that going back to taking a very analytical approach to dissecting the film, if you will, to
Sure.
doing film studies, to being a better coach, like the type of coach based on evidence rather than what you feel, like you were saying. I think one of the main reasons that we don't see that as much as we should, because it should be clear as day, yeah, everybody should be coaching mixed martial arts like that, but the emotional content that surrounds martial art, it's almost like a religion. In fact, a lot of martial arts kind of turn into their own cults or religions of sorts.
A lot of martial artists are religious people.
Yeah. Right here, yeah. Yeah, there's like this idea of in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like we were saying earlier, everything goes in this way. It follows this order of operations.
Right.
And so it's hard to see outside of that lens or through a different lens. See it through the wrestler's lens, for example.
Actually, oddly enough, Brazilians are usually the coaches that understand that it's a game and not a fight.
Right.
Like the Brazilians you speak to are like, yeah, this is a match. This is not a fight. It's other people that are like, yeah, it's a fight. And I'm like, nah, it's not a fight, dude. And Brazilians are like, yeah, that's not fighting. We're having a jiu-jitsu match. It's a contest.
Right. That's interesting. How do you feel, just as a fighter, as a cage fighter, about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes calling their matches, like IBJJF matches, fights?
Well, you can get hurt in jiu-jitsu, so I will say that it's still a risky endeavor. It's still a risky endeavor. Problem is that, pie, tap. Okay, you got me. there's not the emotional, soul-crushing emptiness that there is after losing an open-ended, kind of fisticuffs like MMA.
Right.
That's different, man. Like that's when people sit there and stare into nothingness for a while, and you wish the floor would swallow you, or that you could reverse the clock, and you're like, where was I? You have a fight where it's like you're sitting in the stands watching some loser fight in your spot.
Man, you're describing like exactly how I felt after my very first pro fight, man. That's how it felt.
Right. You're like, what was that? No, if it's your first one, you can always chalk it up to the first one. How about you're going up, and you're actually the favorite?
Okay.
You're not they don't want you to win, but people are really afraid that you will.
Right.
And I've choked in 2 times like that, where the scuttlebutt is Rob's going to run wild on this guy. And I choke. I do something stupid because I'm not feeling not feeling amped. I'm kind of like, I watched it so many times and I visualized it, which is something I used to do in track and field. Jumpers do this a lot, and throwers.
Okay.
Jumpers and throwers, they visualize the perfect mechanics behind what they're doing.
Okay.
They visualize the scene. You visualize everything. I used to do it for volleyball. I would, the night before
my friend Sean does this with deadlifting.
I would visualize all of the people, the colors, the noise. I know what the songs that are going to be played in warm up. Like I may not know what is, but I have a general idea. I'm like, it's going. Before that happens anyway, to put myself in the right frame of mind, I have my headphones in. I'm listening to my stuff. I got it's thunderstruck all the way or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're amped up. Off comes Symphony of Destruction, and you're ready, right?
Right.
And you go out there and you play some ball sport. Now, another thing with ball sports is why do they use videotape? I mean, like, I grew up before videotape, so it's not natural for me to take selfies. It's not natural. It almost feels like a form of vanity.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable with how I look. I'm not comfortable with listening to how I sound. Right. So, like, people say, you got a nice voice. I'd listen to you on a podcast, whatever. I'm not comfortable with me. Does that make sense? I'm also not comfortable with watching myself. So I can watch myself in real time in the mirror and go, that I'm doing it correctly. I can watch fights sometimes and see myself doing something, but I'm my own worst critic. I'm like, the mechanics of that are not efficient. Look at your feet. What are you doing?
Right.
He's right. Your hand is low. What are you doing? I'm like that. And yet still, stupidly, I'm using myself as a stupid example now,
right,
is that I don't videotape every practice, every roll, every sparring session. Every sparring session should be videotaped. You should just have, everybody can afford like a knockoff, what do you call those action cameras?
Yeah. Yeah.
Clamp that on the cage and go to work.
It's such a valuable tool.
Right? Clamp that on the side of the ring, like build a tripod for the corner, stick it to the wall with chewing gum, whatever, and go to work. Watch yourself after. You'll learn. You'll learn more than you ever thought you would.
One of the most important fighters to do, probably the most important fighter to do a film study on is yourself.
Absolutely. And yet still, all the things that I'm telling you about, I watch other people's stuff, sometimes I don't watch my own self nearly enough.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this aversion to that, I think, and a lot of it is this idea, I don't like looking at myself, and I felt like this as well, especially when I was younger. I hated the sound of my voice. I hated it. I hated looking in the mirror.
Right.
Man. So, seeing myself on film, like watching my very first fight, that was difficult.
Now, if I am to be the coach of something, I want to analyze my fighters, and I want to, basically, I'm going to start doing it maybe more scientifically. You look at all the tools we have at our disposal. It doesn't cost that much, even. Like, if you are like have professional fighters, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to buy the Hyksos system. You know this system, the Hyksos.
Hyksos. What is that?
Hyksos. Like the old tribe of warriors from like Mesopotamia. Hyksos.
Okay.
I think they were chariot warriors. Anyway, but it's a system that has a sensor and some crap inside a sheath that you stick in the glove. So then they're measuring velocity, hand velocity, impact, force generated, frequency. They've got all these things. Plus, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they also have some of your biorhythms as well. So you can put together, you can wear it while you're sparring. It's not like having something across your it's a system on both hands. So it measures across the pulse across both wrists or something. I don't know exactly all the things it'll do, except I do know that it'll, and I'm not paid to back them. It's just the best system that I had seen. There might be something better by now. But it allows you to gather information about the force and the speed and the frequency with which you're impacting, and things that you think are hitting hard, maybe it's not that hard, or maybe it's just hard but it's not fast, in which case the impact isn't that great, even though the force is there. And it separates all this, and you can overlay these graphs and these lines and stuff, and you can see where you're fading during a sparring session. You can see you get what I'm after.
Yeah.
So like, I think that this is the path forward, is this overlaid with video. And do you know where I reached this conclusion is from being involved in motorsports. So that's what I do as a day job now. And they have this thing that came out a while back, a long time now, I guess, called a V-Box.
Okay, what's that?
Well, I mean, it'll tell you your lateral G's, your speed. It has a map of the track loaded from GPS. So you've got this accurate track map, and then it shows you your path around the track. So like, your trajectory through corners, your speed at every entrance, your speed at the exit, and then it gives you your hypothetical best lap. So if you got like 10 segments to a track, it'll split the track in 10. If there's 10 corners, maybe it'll split it in 15. I don't know.
So all that cool stuff you would have on the screen if you were playing a video game version of this, you have in real life.
Oh yeah, well, the video game came from real life.
Okay.
So all these things. So this is just a basic thing that a lot of guys that are just the club racing level have, is the ability to overlay this with the video, because they have this system. If you have a really expensive system like something by Motec, would basically be all this included with the information from the engine, included with the information from the suspension. They have some potentiometers on each that show the frequency and the amount that the suspension compresses, and this also with the G's now starts to tell you what's happening. You could go even deeper. You could put infrared sensors in the wheel well to measure how hot the tires are at what point, inside, center, and outside. Then you know whether you're running the correct inflation, and you can tell whether your car's, what your setup is like, like whether it's optimizing the tire patch on the road. There's a lot of things you can do, but just bring it back to the human side of it and get rid of the machine. Let's assume that the machine is perfect. It's just about you and your driving and the camera. So you can give me all the information you want, but if I don't see it where I was on the track, how do I know? I can kind of just see it on this line running around. But when that's overlaid an actual working video, real time, then you're like, oh. And then you can go, what's my hypothetical best lap if I collected all the data from my practice session? So I did 20 laps. There's 10 sectors to the track, so take the best of the 2 sectors, like patch together a hypothetical best, and you'll see that it's like 2 seconds better than the best lap that you ran, because you're not consistent. Now take this concept, whether we can actually apply the technology or not is not the question, it's the concept.
Right.
If we have this ability to have video from fights, videos from practice and scrimmage, like sparring, rolling sessions, we have all this ability to watch ourselves. We can pause, we can rewind infinitely slowly or quickly.
Yeah.
When I was playing volleyball, I didn't have any of this. A video camera was about 35 pounds and cost $3,500 for a basic one.
Oh man, today you can get like an iPhone attachment to film in like 3D.
Absolutely.
I want to get one of those.
For that money, you could have
for sparring.
You could have a drone, and you could wear a thing on your wrist, and it could do circles, around you while you ran around the gym. So the point is that we have all these tools, yet still fighting seems to be the only place that isn't using the tools.
Yeah, that's so weird. Now that you say it out loud, it's like, why not?
Every other sport is capitalizing on understanding of physics and science, and fighting is just starting to scratch the surface with nutrition. Nutrition guys are ahead of the game, like the really cutting edge ones.
Man,
but
it took the longest time for combat sports athletes to recognize the value of strength training. I mean,
are you joking?
Yeah. I'm not joking. I mean, 100 years ago, I mean, even 50 years ago, even today, a lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to lift weights because it's going to make me bulky and slow.
My friends took Taekwondo for years, man. And I was just always awed that they thought they could somehow just beat me up.
Yeah.
You know, like they wouldn't try because they weren't aggressive dudes. And one day I said, yeah, but I don't think any of that's actually that useful. And he was like, no, of course I can beat you up. He took it as a granted, like a given. And I was like, I don't think you can affect anything I do. I own you. And we went out on the lawn, and I promptly threw him on his ass. He threw 2 kicks, and I recognized the pattern, like the foot and the pattern. And I had never fought anybody. I took 1 Taekwondo class. I got no idea what he's doing. He's advanced. He's been doing this stuff for 6-7 years, and he's throwing. And second time he came around with a wheel kick, I stepped in and planted him. I just hit him on the shoulder, like on the collarbone. I like judo chopped him basically and dropped him. It's like an overhand forearm to the collarbone. I clubbed him, gonk, and he fell down and asked me what I hit him with. And I was like, dude, with my arm. I didn't punch you or something. Like, we're not punching to the face. The agreement was I wasn't going to hit him in the face, and that was it. And I threw him on his ass. I was like, yeah, but if I can do that, that means that everybody on that football team can do it. Half the volleyball players and the basketball players can do it. And the town drunk can do it.
Yeah, man, martial artists in general are terrible athletes.
That's the problem. That's the stigma, is because they were doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And the wrong guys that you don't want to get tougher. The idea is that an asshole is going to be meaner if he's somehow taking martial arts. I'm like, no, you're wrong. He's going to be humble. That kid who's a bully, everybody's like, oh, you're giving the weapon to the bully. I'm like,
I've heard this, yeah.
I'm like, wrong. You just got to keep his attention long enough for him not to become a bully anymore. That's what I think.
Yeah, amen to that.
Now, I was never a bully, but I recognize that in a lot of people. I recognize where it comes from, and I see it happening, and I see it in myself. The tendencies that I had, that to think that I was able to do whatever I wanted, I got to rethink them. You know what I mean? I got to rethink them. Yeah, I'm the biggest guy here. Yeah, but I got tooled last week by a guy that weighed 70 kilos. He climbed all over me like I was like a tree. You know, he just climbed me, choked me.
Yeah.
He owned me 3 times in 5 minutes. How did that make me feel? I was, you know, I was a white belt, but I thought I was powerful. I was 97 kilos. It's like, I just got owned. How can I feel that I know everybody in this room is inferior to me, and you know, just shut the fuck up or I'll slap you. You know what I mean? Well, maybe not. Maybe that guy's a boxer. Do you know Mario? Do you remember Mario?
Mario.
He
I know a few
wears
Marios.
glasses, has a little bit of a belly. He's really, really quiet guy. He's a little bit, now he's a little out of shape, but I mean, even when he was in shape, he was unassuming.
Right.
And then he knocked out Zhao Zilong.
Oh, really?
And everybody went, oh, shit. This is back in my first event. He was also there. He was the guy that I sent in my place because they were like, we need somebody to fight. And I was like, yeah, but he's a champion of the country. Here, you know, my friend also has some pedigree. Please accept his entry because I don't think I'm worthy. Little did I know that I got the upgraded model left-handed. You know, that's what they offered me.
Man, so many of the great fighters are unassuming, man.
He's totally unassuming. And he's mild-mannered and totally controlled, and he's smart. You know what I mean? And all these things and that you don't think he's going to be.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is that a lot of the Chinese fighters are also mild-mannered, well-mannered, quiet guys. Why?
Oh, yeah.
Because you get your ass kicked on a daily basis. Some days you're the hammer. It doesn't matter who you are. Some days you're the hammer. Some days you're the nail.
Right.
You know? There'll be days I go in, I come out of a sparring session, I'm like, why do I even go to practice? I'm God. and then you come out, seriously, you're too old to everybody. And then you come out the next week and you're like, wow, I need work. Like, that was humiliating.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. My 40th birthday a few weeks back, I decided to do a Shark Tank with all my students and you know, some of my long-term students that were there, and it's just one after the other. They get a couple minutes to come spar with me.
Randori
no breaks
style.
Yeah, you know, it's fun. That's what I wanted to do on my birthday. It was like a present to me. And about 20 minutes in, this new student, this girl I've been coaching for about 3 weeks, who knew 2 submissions, the rear naked choke and the Kimura. She surprises me with a single leg takedown, which I also taught her. This girl paid attention. But, you know, I was, you know, a little weathered from 20 minutes of sparring. She gets the takedown. She passes the guard. She moves to north-south to stabilize because, you know, I teach her, you know, when you're smaller, fighting a bigger, stronger opponent, use more of your weight against less of their body. She does that like clockwork, locks up the arm, catches me in the Kimura. I'm like, dang, the smallest, weakest, least experienced person in the room is the one who got the submission.
Yeah.
And I walked out of there scratching my head a little bit like, well, just astounded for a couple of reasons. Like, one, humbled, and 2, impressed.
Yeah.
But man, martial arts is amazing that way. So I think we want martial arts to be magical, and in that sense it totally is. But as far as like fight preparation and coaching, like we're talking about bringing the science into the coaching, it takes away the magic, takes away the mysticism of it all.
Yeah, but it's science, it's math, it's calculations and probabilities. There's a lot of gambling involved. You dip when you should dodge. And then there's a mindset to stay on course. Do you think that Eddie didn't know how to deal with Conor? You think that Mark Henry isn't a top-end striking coach in MMA? He is. The problem is that he dipped when he should have dodged. After the fight, the first thing he said was, everything that we practice, I did the exact opposite of. And he goes, I don't even know why. I think I was just so into it. I wanted to hit him so bad. I just did the exact opposite of what we practiced. And I mean, I never thought of Eddie as the most cerebral fighter, but that was the most true stuff that he ever said.
Yeah.
You know, and you can see it, that he misunderstands or misunderstood, and a lot of Conor's opponents, especially at 145, they didn't have an understanding of the range, but not the length, like not the distance range, but the angle that he's capable of hitting with the left hand. So they think that because their left foot, being a conventional fighter, is outside of Conor's right foot, that he is that they have an advantage. They're going to throw the right hand down the pipe, and that they're going to hit him, right?
Oh man, that's such a misconception.
He rocks back, and his hand's low. It's cocked for power, not for coverage.
Right.
He doesn't blink either. He's really good at not blinking. Like, he watches the hand all the way in, and he'll rock back, and they'll step out. They do everything correctly. They throw the punch, textbook, and step outside of his lead arm.
Right.
So now, technically, most of us cannot throw convincingly across our hand. But this is where that movement and flexibility and yoga shit comes in, is that he cannot just hit here, he can hit here. So he's got an extra 10 degrees of lateral range he can hit at. An extra 15 degrees. Watch him. He goes well past his axis, like his perpendicular axis, especially considering his foot positioning.
Right.
And he clubs people when they think that they should be. They did everything correctly.
Suddenly, Ido Portal and all that touch button in the park makes sense, man.
That twist, he's reaching well across his body. Yeah. He's overextended. He's well past parallel. He's like 10, 15 degrees past parallel. You don't see it until you look at the overhead view. This is why I watch replays like a hawk while everybody's talking. I'm watching the replay, and that's because they show that overhead finishing. You get to see stuff. You see interesting stuff like that. You see interesting stuff with Edson Barbosa when he does a spinning wheel kick and he's knocked out some dudes. You can see where his feet are, where he's setting it up.
Wasn't he the first guy to land a spinning hook kick in the UFC?
To win by knockout by it, I think. I think so, yeah. But he lands one a fight now. He hit Khabib with it too. It's just Khabib didn't go to sleep. He almost made Kevin Lee go to sleep, and Kevin Lee beat him up worse than Khabib did. I think Kevin Lee's the dark horse of that division, by the way. I think he's by far the biggest monster, and he's going to have the most terrifying lightweight title reign that we've seen in probably 10 years.
Okay.
Just not quite yet.
Interesting.
They're not giving him that, and he screwed it up by having a staph infection when he fought Tony, who is probably the second biggest. So honestly, right now, I see this as a fight for third. People will shit all over me. I appreciate it. I welcome your comments, but I see it as...
Yes, please comment. Let Rob and me know what you think about that.
This weekend's a fight for the third best lightweight fighter in the UFC.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Man. I just realized I didn't turn my timer on. I have no idea how much time we have left on this thing until I run out of memory.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. We'll keep talking until it goes off.
Yeah. Well, what other fights are intriguing to you right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. I gotta say, I haven't watched the UFC in a while, which probably sounds like a horrible sin for a mixed martial arts coach. But I haven't watched the UFC in a while.
There's a lot of events, man. There's a lot of events. It's hard. And then there's the Contender Series. Like if you want to be a mega fan, you could overdose just on Zuffa products. Bellator had some interesting stuff happening and has some more interesting stuff coming up.
Yeah.
Like Bellator is starting to turn into a real powerhouse promotion. I mean, they were always big, but they're getting bigger.
Man, I've been doing
Eddie Alvarez just signed with ONE. I heard this.
Really?
I haven't, of course, seen him show up and confirm, but this is what I heard.
ONE FC, man. If the viewers are not familiar with that, it's a big fight league MMA promotion down here in Southeast Asia in Singapore.
It's where Askren was the champ for running for years. Yeah, he's been the champ here. He runs that division with no challenge at all. Anyway, I won't go on, but yeah.
Ooh. ONE FC. Do you think that's ever going to be like a rival to the UFC? It's going to be the next Bellator or whatever.
Rival to the UFC in terms of size and world scope? No. Regionally, yes. Regionally, I think that they're in a great position to dominate Asia for years to come.
Yeah, it makes sense.
If you saw the way that they were treating us at Martial Combat, because they treated us real well, it's the same promotion, just got retooled when they changed ownership. But it's the same promotion, same CEO, the same guys running it, the same organizational quality is still in place, and Victor Quay is still the chief orchestrator, the conductor of things over there. So you still have quality accommodations for fighters. You still got quality referees and really like a thorough medical staff, like quality. Just it's a high-end promotion, even though it's just regional. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
We got treated well, and every time that I've taken fighters to ONE, we got treated real well. Every time I was coaching, anybody that has gripes about some contract things or maybe some promotional issues, and they're actually right, but it doesn't matter if you're right. Here's what I mean by that: is that they could be logically right. Something's not fair, right? But you have to realize that it's a business that has to survive in the marketplace. And as annoying as it sounds, a lot of this depends on who you are, based on where you're from, what you look like, etc. That's why they promote certain fighters, even though one area or one country can literally dominate all rankings. They carefully monitor how many guys they're bringing from this place, how many from here, which guys are getting the push, which guys are getting the promotion. You may be able to beat the hell out of two guys at the top end of that division. They may not want you to.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's not just one. The UFC does this really blatantly lately. I am hesitant to say anything about the judging being tied because you can't prove it, but you could say in the UFC, some events stick out in my mind, some fights, and it was all a certain event. The one that Arlovsky, the one that Romero just fought Whitaker, the second fight.
Okay.
Arlovsky also fought Tai Tuivasa. And Holly Holm fought, what's the big girl? The tall girl. I can't remember her name. She has a podcast too with Aussie and Fancy. Anyway, she's the Aussie half, no doubt. So, anyway, these three had, like, the UFC had special pictorials, special stories. They got a lot of hype. And It's weird to have all this hype in Middle America. I think this was like Ohio or something like that, Wisconsin, something.
Right.
It was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, not middle of nowhere. It's the middle of America. I'm saying it wasn't L.A. It had nothing to do with Australians. That's my point. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, I could understand
hyping up an Australian fighter.
if this was a guy from Nebraska getting big push there. I could understand it. They had 3 Australians on the card, and they decided this was the card they were going to pump Australian content into North America, and so they hyped them up a lot. And Holly Holm took her apart convincingly. I thought that Andrei Arlovsky put on a vintage performance, but Andrei Arlovsky's